In 1991, 17 people set out to climb a mountain. They were the best mountaineers China and Japan had. 3 years of research, top-tier equipment, weather windows calculated down to the hour. What they saw was 6,740 meters, technically feasible, conditions acceptable. The Tibetans at the foot of the mountain saw something else. Kawa Karpo, dwelling of the gods. Not unconquered yet, unconquerable by nature. All 17 died in an avalanche. I recently read a book called Meili, Snow Mountain, Searching for 17 Friends, Yoshinori Kobayashi's account of the disaster, and of how he spent the next 2 decades returning to the mountain he once wanted to conquer. This book stayed with me. The climbing team saw a problem: altitude, gradient, weather, gear. A problem exists, you solve it. A mountain stands there, you summit it. Every year, thousands of pilgrims walk the Kora around Kawa Karpo, a weeks-long trek through forest and high passes, circling the mountain without ever setting foot on its slopes. They hang prayer flags at the passes. They prostrate on frozen ground. They're not trying to get anywhere. The pilgrims circle. The climbers climb. One moves with the mountain, the other against it. Kawa Karpo is a deity, not an obstacle. You can gaze up at it. You can walk around it. You don't put your feet on its face. This isn't superstition versus science. There's an ancient wisdom buried in "you shall not climb." Some boundaries exist not because we're not strong enough, but because they are agreements between humans and what is sacred, between ambition and reverence. A documentary called Surviving Progress names this pattern, the progress trap. Our ability to solve problems creates bigger problems. The film gives an example from prehistory: early humans hunting woolly mammoths. Learning to hunt more efficiently was progress, killing 2 at a time instead of 1. But when they figured out how to drive entire herds off a cliff, they wiped out their own future food supply. The ability to feed a village became the ability to cause extinction. Conquest is the grammar of progress. Conquer nature. Conquer your limits. Conquer yourself. When progress becomes an unquestionable faith, it becomes another kind of blindness. This isn't just a story about civilization. It's how we live. We get smarter. We get more efficient. We optimize. And sometimes, in our eagerness to solve the problem in front of us, we drive something off a cliff. Our health, our relationships, our sense of why we started in the first place. The trap isn't set for fools. It's set for the capable, the prepared, the ones who can walk far enough to trigger it. We're taught to climb, solve the problem, overcome the obstacle, reach the top. But what if the mountain you're climbing isn't yours? What if you're just climbing because someone told you, "Here's a mountain, go climb it"? I made it into tech. Didn't make any money though. But I'm grateful for the version of me that didn't. When you can't keep up with the mainstream story, you're forced to learn the difference between your own feelings and other people's voices. Living by what others say is easy, but sooner or later, everyone has to face who they really are, through illness or through loss, or through greater illness or greater loss. The years I was winning awards, I wasn't happy. Long stretches of inflammation, punctuated by brief flickers of approval. External achievement only rewarded my anxiety, my harshness, my perfectionism. Years after the avalanche, Kobayashi came back to Meili. Not to climb. He followed the Tibetans on Kora. He stayed with herding families. He made dried cheese curds in smoky kitchens. He approached the sacred peak with his camera, not footprints. In the early days of walking the Kora, he kept looking up, still studying the ridgelines, still calculating routes in his head. But over time, he stopped looking up. He began to look outward, into the valleys, inward, into himself, deeper into the forest, the villages, the lives unfolding at the foot of the mountain. And somewhere along the way, he found his way back to photography, not as a record of conquest, but as a way of seeing. He began to orbit around life itself, and in that slower circling, parallel to his old obsession, he discovered a new kind of devotion. In his book, Kobayashi wrote something I've translated from the Chinese edition. When I looked at Kawa Karpo as an object to be climbed, all I could see was the vast base beneath the snow. But now I can see the paths winding through the forest, the pastures scattered in the deep mountains. I can get close to the flowers blooming on the grasslands, the mushrooms growing in the woods, and the faces of the people moving between the meadows. The mountain didn't change. His eyes did. When you stop trying to conquer, you finally begin to see. After 1991, Kawa Karpo was permanently closed to climbing, almost unheard of in mountaineering history. I don't think this was humanity giving up. I think it was finally learning a different posture. Some things you can gaze upon, but don't need to possess. Draw near, but never conquer. I started letting go of the track, turned to dough, to clay, to scraps of fabric. These days, I bake sourdough in the early morning. I throw pots that come out lopsided and keep them anyway. I sew useless things. I drink tea slowly and watch my cat sleep in squares of sunlight. I pulled myself back from the grand, distant, blazing promise and returned to the quiet, small glimmer right at my feet. The light never disappeared. It just has different colors and shapes. I had been living in its shelter all along, but my eyes were blinded by the golden peak. I'm learning to love the life at the foot of the mountain, the bright green of moss, the glint of morning dew, the fleeting moments and quiet eternities of spring, summer, autumn, winter. There's a saying, I've seen it attributed to a Tibetan teacher, though I've never found the original source. 100 wishes fell through. 10,000 wishes I never thought to make came true. Late at night, when everything is quiet, Life feels so full, like an entire forest growing in my little backyard. I keep waking up inside dense chapters of my own fate. Haven't made a cent, but I've dodged a lot of illness and loss. Dawn breaks, immense. I've never loved the long wind and the crisp cold of breathing this much. The obsession with the summit has turned from a distant longing into a distant memory. You can only see the golden peak when you stop climbing. Thanks for walking with me. This is Uncarved.